History Club. Sorry with the technical problems. We meet here every other Wednesday in honor of William Mackey Jr., Amos Wilson, El Haj Malik Shabazz, Brother Louis Ray Rivera, Gil Noble, Minister Khalid, Dr. Ben, Dr. Clark, Leola Maddox, Big Harold, and all the historians that gave up fame and fortune burned at midnight oil because they believed in bringing information to the community. They paid a big price, and they didn't have to go that route. That's a big decision. So we honor them, and even in this day of YouTube, we never want these people to be forgotten. Miss Leola Maddox had an old car, and she drove that car all the way from Teaneck to the UAM. Of course, she believed in bringing people together. So we never want these names to be forgotten in the age of technology. Because the World Economic Forum, they can wipe it out. They're already censoring everything you say. They don't want you saying nothing then. There's no dissent. So DVDs still matter, but you don't know what's coming down the pipe, you know. So we have these books in honor of Amos Wilson to help survival in African world info systems. Amos Classic, Blueprint for Black Power. African-centered consciousness versus the New World Order. The falsification of African consciousness. Issues of manhood in black and white. The psychology of self-hatred and self-defeat toward a reclamation of the African mind. Sababu just finished that in honor of Amos. It's a vicious book. And then we had Black on Black Violence. The psychodynamics of self-annihilation in service of white domination. And all you hear throughout the news media, black on black crime, oh, something has to be done. What is going on? I can't ride the subways. Oh. You ever hear anybody mention Amos Wilson's book? No. The developmental psychology of the black child and the awakening the natural genius of black children. We also have in honor of Louis Ray Rivera, who left us too soon. Just like Professor Mackey left us too soon. Dr. Ben left us too soon. Dr. Clark left us too soon. He would come down here and talk for hours. And Brother Colvin would be here. Yeah. All right, hold on. Colvin, you got a guy outside in the wheelchair. Help him come down the stairs. So, yeah, we do that. Louis Ray would speak for hours. He come out of Marcy Project. Knew my whole family. WBAI. He would talk and talk. Unbelievable, bro. He left us too soon, so we have this book. We have S.K. Damiani, Distorted Truths, the Bastardization of African Cosmology. Sister Etta James, I'm a Wellness Witness. And Earl Ponder, Revealing the Unspeakable Bible Verses. The Truth About Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and the Holy Trinity. Earl Ponder left us too soon. And Sababu had a whole bunch of his books. He left us. So I have these books here. You know, so I got a couple of other books. Theodore Allen, The Invention of the White Race. All a good read. In honor of Dr. Randy Short, Slavery Mastery, The Impact of Religious Slavery Revealed. In honor of Brother Harold, The Transfer Agreement, The Untold Story, and the Secret Pact between the Third Reich and Jewish Palestine. Sister Carol Alexander, The Unspoken Truth of Our Racial Divide. In honor of Dr. Ben, Black Man of the Nile and his family. Dr. Ben. We have Tim Wise, White Like Me, Reflections on Race from a Privileged Son. The problem with that is Was anybody privileged in the 1800s when they was coming through Castle Garden, present day Ellis Island? Wasn't too privileged there. Jeannie Ray McNair, groundwork, Charles Hamilton Houston, and the struggle for civil rights. So a lot of people claiming civil rights today, but they ain't pay no dues. They have to pay dues for civil rights. Now they're civil rights leaders, not civil rights, but civil rights. So we have the Irritated Genie, new book, Views of the Problem, World War II, COVID-19, media censorship, and food shortages. This is the Irritated Genie's new book. Dr. Scott Whitaker out of Atlanta, Georgia. His book, Medicine, the Causes and Solutions to Diseases, Malnutrition, and the Medical Sins that are killing the world. And I have these two publications. The Truth About COVID-19, Exposing the Great Reset by Dr. McCullough and Ronnie Cummings, and the blockbuster book, The Real Anthony Fauci, Robert Kennedy and the Children's Health Defense Fund, Bill Gates, Big Pharma, and the Global War on Democracy. And Children's Health Defense had just came out with a documentary, and it is very powerful. If you put your email in the chat, I'll send you the link, and you can watch it, and it is, I have to give it to him, he did a good job. It is based on a book, but ain't nothing like reading that book. It's gonna take a long time because you get thousands of footnotes. With Robert Kennedy and these other doctors go in and you have to log on and read it to make sure they're true. So we have these books. Now I'm gonna give you a couple of community events because it's all about information. Tomorrow on Facebook Live, Blog Talk Radio, Tad, Keisha, and I say, and Brother Black, Facebook Live, 8 o'clock. That's an excellent program, and they're going to be on tomorrow. At 10:30 on Saturdays, 10:30 p.m., our Philadelphia family, Sister Empress Chi, Blog Talk Radio, Sister Filet. That comes on at 10:30. You type in Empress Chi, you stroll down the New Day Resurrection, and they go from 10:30 and wheel and deal sometimes at 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. Sister Empress Chi, the Million Women's March. So you want to get involved with that while everybody trying to get their groove on and get back to normal. Sister Empress and our Philadelphia family are really doing some good stuff. Also, Comati Live, Sankofa Revolutionary Radio, WarNearRising.com, Io Comati, WSYP 95.1 FM, Active African Perspective, out of Birmingham, Alabama. That comes on at 10 o'clock every Monday, and he goes for an hour, and you can even call in. Our brother from Baltimore, this is our Baltimore family, Brother Darren Muhammad, State of the City. He might be on tonight, he might be on tomorrow. But Saturday at 12 o'clock on TuneIn Radio, WEBR 1590 AM, Glen Burnie. And also, if you have Instagram, Mohammed the Camel. And he comes on Facebook Live. So that's our Baltimore connection. And Darren is giving it up live. Good brother. Also on Tuesday, Dr. Aline, Your Immunity Project. That's on Tuesday at 7 o'clock. That's another excellent program. Also, we have Community Cop with Mike Graves, Noah Leader, Julian Harper. That's Tuesdays at 5 o'clock, ManhattanNeighborhoodNetwork.org. So we have those. Also, on Fridays, Brother Truss and African Echoes, they have an 8 o'clock study group. If you put your email in the chat, They start at 8 o'clock, and they're doing the psychology of self-hatred and self-defeat toward the African, toward the redevelopment, reclamation of the African mind. That's African Echoes. Saturday, Friday at 8 o'clock. Also, Saturday, the Know Thyself Study Group with Brother True out of Asbury Park. Trust is the mediator of that study group, and they are doing Chancellor Williams, The Destruction of Black Civilization. That starts at 1. Also, we have Dr. James McIntosh, Wednesday at 2 o'clock. WBAI, Minefield. Excellent program. So this is for the listening community and the people that want to get information. Now I'm going to give you something more for the Simultap. Dr. McIntosh is having a forum Saturday the 22nd. Question on the Woman King movie. They're going to have a panel. Sister Tyrene Wright, Dr. James McIntosh, Sister Francis Rogers, Francis Rogers Rhodes, Milton Alamari, Dr. Awika Maya, Ayo Akinmaya, Professor James Smalls, and Sister Betty Dobson. That's going to be a program on the Woman King, the movie. So we have that, and also the documentary from the Children's Health Defense Fund with Robert Kennedy. It is real good. So you could just Google that and it'll come up. So we have these events coming on, and that's what it's about, information to the community. So Zoom audience, thank you, and the people that came out, give yourself a big hand. You can view all of the lectures of the Brooklyn William Mackey Jr. History Club on YouTube, and you can view all the programs of Community Cop on YouTube. Community Cop, Brooklyn William Mackey Jr. History Club. Okay. So without further ado, family, last week, if you missed last week, that's all right. Dr. James McIntosh said he will come again, and he's going to do part 2 of the reclamation of the African mind. I want everybody to give a great big hand to our keynote speaker tonight, Dr. James McIntosh of Simultap. Thank you very much.
Greetings, brothers and sisters. Greetings. I ask my elders for permission to speak. Better be careful.
Ain't nobody older than you.
Might be the elder, but that's okay. Thank you so much. So last week what happened is we had a technical breakdown so that the slides, which were supposed to go with the things I was talking about, wasn't working. So the slides weren't working. And what I'm going to do now is try to go through the slides. I'm going to do it the opposite way. Last time I spoke, and then I tried to show the slides to back it up. So this time I'm going to show the slide and try to tell you the relationship to the topic. The topic is the war to control the African mind. Okay. So, I mean, that war begins with you inside. You're trying to control your own African mind, aren't you? Right? Because if you don't control it, somebody else is going to control it. Why is it important to control the African mind? Why is it important for other people to control the African mind? Because the mind is the key to controlling the person, controlling that person's resources, controlling that person's land. So it's one of the parts of the slavery was, of course, physical slavery, but it was also important to control the mind. Take away the people's drums, if that's a method through which they communicate, or if that's a method through which they get in touch with spirit. Take that away. Don't ever sit down and teach them the language of the new place that they're in, let them pick it up halfway. Split them up so people that speak the same language can't communicate. See, all of those are tools of controlling the mind. Giving the people a religion that's alien to them. Although it wasn't alien to all, some of these religions were not alien to all Africans. All of Africa had contact with these religions before. But giving it to them in a way in which they come to see white as superior. They come to see white as the divine, to see white as God. All of those are ways of controlling the African mind, and that's why it's done. Now, the whole name of this talk, when I'm giving it in the past, is Media and the War to Control the African Mind. Now, let's talk about media. What is media? Media is a word that derives from the word that means middle. And media is, in reality, anything that is the middle between one mind and another mind. So it could be a matchbook cover. And on that matchbook cover it says, "Eat it, Joe." That's a medium. Media is the plural of medium. It could be a billboard. You've seen it, a billboard with a picture of Sada up on it. She's a criminal. It could be a record. It could be music. It could be a CD. It could be a DVD. It could be a tattoo. Media is all around you. Messages are coming in at you from all around. And when it's coming from Europeans towards us, it's always for the purpose of controlling our minds, one way or another. The first media were created by Africans. They say that Africans didn't write. Brother Butweko, how many people remember Brother Dix? Is anybody who remembers brother and sister Dix? They were soldiers. They were Alton's big supporters. And Brother Dix changed his name to Brother Butweko, and he wrote a book. And then he said, not only did Africans write, not only did we write, he said we wrote on the walls, we wrote on the furniture, we wrote on the silverware, we wrote on everything.
That's right.
So I start with some pictures back here. I'm going to recommend a book to you that I haven't even finished reading myself, but it's called Imhotep the African. And I have a picture of Professor Clark there just because to me, Professor Clark looks like some of the early depictions of Imhotep. Right? Looks just like Imhotep. And Professor Clark called Imhotep the world's first multi-genius. It is said that he was a writer. He was a physician. He was an architect and an engineer. He built the world's first stone edifice, the Step Pyramid at Saqqara. And we're talking about 5,000 years ago. It was around 2,800 years ago, and this is 2,200 years after, in the Common Era. And so that means it was 5,000 years or so ago. Sir William Osler, the father of American medicine, called Imhotep the first figure of a physician to stand out from the mist of antiquity.
That's right.
All right? So this shows that really there are a lot of people who put us down, but they really know who we are. Okay, slides here. Okay, I'm showing you that Africans were doing successful Caesarean section. This is from a Scottish medical journal. The guy's name was Felton. He wrote that in 1879. He described Africans using palm oil, palm wine, I should say, to sterilize the instruments and both the woman and the child who lived. Now, this is late. The first surgical textbook is called the Edwin Smith Papyrus. The Edwin Smith Papyrus, Dr. Ben always said, they name it after the people who stole it. Okay. The real name of that papyrus is On the Imposition of Medicine Upon the Body of a Man. So this is showing you when people try to split Kemet off from the rest of Africa, that you can't do it. The Egyptians, they told you where they came from. And the old name, the old Kemet included a whole lot of those countries that are over there, and you still have vestiges of those things. There's even things that look like pyramids made out of mud brick further up the Nile. When I say up the Nile, I mean south, right? Down the Nile is north. Okay. I'm not going to stay on the medicine too much. We're just trying to establish something about the African mind. The African mind is the mind that built the pyramids. The African mind is the mind that wrote first. The mind that dealt with all the disciplines that you have now. You know, the math, the geometry, the trigonometry. They tried to say that Euclid invented geometry and the Pythagoras invented the Pythagorean theorem. All of this is nonsense. All right. Again, it didn't just stay on the continent. It actually came with us over here. This is an account. Somebody asked me about this last week when I was here, and I told them Onesimus is one of the names. I don't know what the brother's real name was, but he was an enslaved person in the bondage of Cotton Mather, a Puritan minister in Boston. And he introduced the idea of inoculation to fight disease.
Save the city of Boston.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I told you, you don't have to worry about me. Sister Betty told me, always remember when I'm talking in the audience, there might be 3 or 4 people out there that know more about it than me. So I know, Brother Mike, I got Mike to back me up over here. Thank you. Okay. Look at all the genius in this house. What's your name, brother? Johnny. Jahi, Brother Jahi. Let's give a black hand for having that knowledge to help us with this thing here. So we go over here. Okay, this is called the Moscow Papyrus. It's mainly about mathematics. All right, this is the African mind. We're talking about the war to control the African mind. Why would anybody want to control the African mind? That's how I'm starting off. I'm going to come into the current time, but just starting it off. And this is a proof, a brother showing you how to calculate, the volume of a truncated pyramid.
There is also papyrus calculus on it and differential equation on it. They have it in London Museum, Paris Museum.
That's it. Speak up. I mean, we got collective knowledge here. Let's put all that together, so they can hear you.
There is a papyri, and I think it's either London or Germany, one of those countries. It has calculus on it, it has differential equation on it, it has trigonometry on it. They know very well. A few years ago, I bought about maybe 100 Greek classics, and I read all of them. And basically, most of what we know is lies. The truth there in those books. All the ancient people said the Africans did. The modern races, of course, has an agenda, as he said, to control us and maintain control of us indefinitely. So it's up to our people to wake up the mind. It is about the mind.
So the book that can introduce you to that whole area right there is Stolen Legacy by George G.E.M. James, okay? And also, the book I told you, Imhotep the African, shows you that there's more proof of Imhotep being a mathematician and an astronomer than there is of his being a physician. The evidence of him being a physician is there, but it's very small. You know, you see him referred to as a great physician and that sort of thing. So this African mind is something else, brothers and sisters. And you got to remember, we all have one.
Yes, sir.
Okay. This is one. They try, and they always try to retract everything. Once they discover something, they try to retract it. When I say once they write or reveal something about us, they try. So I don't know how many of you all ever heard the record "A Seeds a Star" by Stevie Wonder. Did you ever notice the lyrics? What he's singing about? He says, "Potolo, though it is small, it is the heaviest of them all." And what he is describing is, I believe I'm not sure what they call it, walk or whatever it is, but these sketches on the right show you the Dogon's sketches regarding their knowledge of cosmology, the knowledge of the twin star of Sirius, also called Sirius B. And you know, there are all kinds of things in their cosmology they may attribute to it, that sort of thing. I heard Frances Welston speak on it at the first Melanin Conference, and she was postulating, she was calling the star Soliton B, and postulating ways that people can send waves with their mind, so that's all over my head. But she was talking about, she was linking it to George Washington Carver, who spoke about that he spoke to the planets. So that was at the first Melanin Conference. If I have time later, I'll tell you a funny story about something that occurred at the Melanin Conference. It has to do with judging people as soon as you see them, right? In fact, I'm gonna tell you right now. There's no record of this except for the people who can remember it. At that first Melanin Conference, when Frances Welsing, everything was building up to her. It was the end of the conference. When she got to the end, she saw a couple of people she recognized out the audience. She called the brother. She recognized the brother. And he came over, and when he came over, the video people looked at him, and literally they said, let's break this thing. We don't know. They started breaking the stuff down. So he was talking about, you have to do everything all over cameras.
No, they'll come back.
Okay.
It's not on.
So he was talking about the fact that first he didn't reveal everything at first, but he was saying that the first thing that made him have suspicions about AIDS, what he talked in vaccines, he said, was the Africans in the General Assembly had put several resolutions already over the decades saying, hey, how come we have Western trained physicians, but every time you discover a new disease or whatever it is, it's discovered by a European, and it's discovered in the vicinity of an aid station or World Health Organization center. And a guy named Douglas wrote a book called Who Murdered Africa? And he said, this isn't a question, this was a declarative sentence. Who? He meant the World Health Organization. And he points out a whole lot of discrepancies in terms of the distribution of AIDS. He showed that the top 5 countries in which AIDS at that point was in Africa were places where they had a smallpox vaccination program. Another guy in a thing called a Strecker Memorandum showed you that over here in the United States, if you took the risk factors and the groups and so on and so forth, that they were the same places where there had been a hepatitis B vaccination program long before that. So this brother said he was the head of the swine flu vaccination program in Washington, D.C. He had been the head of that. And he said he didn't know why brothers didn't want to take it. He said, brother, I hate to impose on you again, but if you could hook me up again to get the slides back up there. Okay, so he said he wanted to know why brothers didn't want to take it. He said that was the first thing that tipped him off. Then the thing that happened with the brothers in the General Assembly, the fact that they, had expressed suspicions about this type of thing. So he said, okay, I've heard it.
Question mark.
Let me not touch anything.
Question mark.
Okay, thank you. All right, so the brother said that, he was talking, understand, these video people, they just breaking the stuff down, they packing all the stuff up and getting ready to go. He said, but the thing, that got me, he said, I wondered why they had all of the samples numbered. Why they had them numbered, and they had the communities they were supposed to go to. So he said, so I made a mistake. He said, and I sent the batch that was for all white Arlington to Central Central Washington, D.C. The audience started applauding. He said, well, I'm glad y'all thought it was a good idea. He said, because they sent things out to intercept the trucks in mid-route when I told him. And he said, and so then I knew. Well, now they tried to put that stuff together. And when you got the tapes from the Melanin Conference, it had everything up through Francis Welsing's speech and didn't have those things that their brother said. And I can't tell you his name, but he was a physician, he was a high physician. Now, the thing that made me suspicious of it was when they made a brother named Merriweather. How many people remember Merriweather? He was a doctor. They made him the head of the swine flu vaccination program. I don't want to get it mixed up. It could have been Legionnaires, but it was one of those vaccination programs. I think it was swine flu. And Merriweather came to fame. And it's so funny, it shows you how elusive fame is. I'll tell you, there wasn't a black person in the country that didn't know Merriweather's name at the time that he did what he did. This was back in the 70s. He was a guy that hadn't been, anybody remember him? Brother Merriweather? Okay, so Merriweather was at home watching a track meet with his wife. He was a doctor over there at Columbia Physicians and Surgeons. And so he's watching this track meet. He goes, I can run fast. He wasn't a track person or anything. So he started practicing. He started running up and down the stairs at Columbia PI, up and down the stairs. And he comes to a track meet, I guess it was about 1970, in a pair of, a surgeon's smock and a pair of swimming trunks. And he ran 109 flat. All right? Which was a world record. Nobody equaled that until Thomas Smith, so on and so forth. So what happened is that Merriweather had great popularity. And then, I won't say that it was just from that, but I assume that because he was a hematologist, that's different from virology. They made him the head of that program. And I said, wow, this looks like a public relations thing. They're taking a popular black sports hero who is a physician. He is a physician, he's qualified to do that, but why him? And so that was one of the things. So this brother telling me this other story basically kind of backed up my own suspicions of what was going on. So now, next slide, this one I already told you about this. We're still talking about the African mind. The mind, yes. I told you this was the Edwin Smith papyrus, a textbook on surgery. This is the African mind that can play faster than you can think. All right? I don't know if anybody know who that is? Joey somebody, I can't. No, it's not Joey. It's not fast. Okay, this is a guy they call, you know what his nickname was? Lester Young's nickname was Prez, right? You know what his nickname was? God.
Oh, okay, I know who that is.
Tell him. Artatum.
Artatum.
You can go and look at a representation of him playing this thing called, and it is impossible. There's no way that your hands could move on the different places. Two hands could move. In fact, Oscar Peterson, who was a jazz player, Bill Noble had him on his show. He talked about how when he was about 14, he was wiping them out in Canada. You know what I'm trying to say? Like nobody could touch him. And he was getting a big head. So his father bought the record by, I think it might have been called Bumblebee Rag or whatever. So he bought it and he played it for him. And Peterson's words were, they're great. Who are they? He thought it was two people playing. Okay? This is a real story. He told us on Like It Is on Gil Noble. But that's the African mind. There was another musician who, when the bebop era came in, he was reading the music, he was doing stuff, and he said he just didn't see what it was all about. He started playing, and he said he just didn't get why people were making this big thing. And then he came to America, and he found out he was playing it at 1/4. I mean, that the people were playing it at 4 times the speed he was playing it at. He was playing at 1/4 speed. So that's the African. This is African mind that held families together under the worst of circumstances. The worst of circumstances. You know that these are the children of the so-called master. And yet, the African mind looked for their families, raised their families, and that's why we're here today. Okay, now let's see if we get to some other stuff that is more related to CMOTAP. I go over there too far all the time. Okay, the African mind is the mind that defeated Napoleon. Napoleon's armies. Okay, and Haiti. All right. So Professor Clark pointed out that one of the things that allowed the Africans to win was a technological advance. Anybody know what it was? It was a technological superiority that they had over the French. Anybody know what it was? Professor Clark used to always say, until Marconi's invention of the wireless, the drum was the most efficient form of communication on the planet. Unlike smoke signals, it wasn't affected by the weather. And it was encoded. So if you didn't speak the language, you couldn't get the message. So when Napoleon's troops have to send a message by Pony Express, the brothers would have the counter to it on the drum just like that. I mean, there were other things that led to it, but that's an important one. The African mind, the African mind. This is the African mind, Booker T. Washington. You know what they're doing there? You heard that he built the, first of all, when he got to Tuskegee, do you know what was there?
No.
They told him he was the president of Tuskegee. When he got there, nothing. Exactly, there was nothing there. So he had to build it up. And he was determined to teach African people how to build things from scratch, to build final products, finished products, not rough, finished products from scratch. What do I mean by scratch? Well, you would say you built a building from scratch if you took the bricks and the lumber. No. To make the bricks.
That's right.
He had to do lots of experiments over and over until he learned, how to make a brick. They built that university that way, and that's a picture of it. That's why Marcus Garvey came over to learn, to meet. He wanted to meet Booker T. Washington. These are some of Garvey's businesses. I don't have to go through that. But Garvey, again, the African mind. What's the first factory you see over here? And what do you think they built in one of those first factories? A doll factory, right? Because your children, that's your most precious asset. Well, I didn't want to say asset. I want to say, it's not even commodity. It's a part of you. I want to say it's the most important part of you. So your children playing with white dolls, and at the same time, he's accomplishing that their fathers and mothers are not unemployed. So that was some of the brilliance of Garvey. That's the African mind. And they pretty much have control of it because right here, it's so funny, all of these slides that are coming, I didn't even realize these were on here. Okay, I gotta go back over here. This is a picture of people who made important inventions or, technologically we could be in medicine. Does anybody think they know all of them? There's some up there, people are going to say, why are they up there? I'm glad you told me, Brother Ray, about Brother Truss's program. I went there on that Friday, and he told me the other half of something that I already knew, and I didn't get a chance to talk to him, and I didn't get a chance to stay on it because something knocked me off the internet. Okay, so in the upper left-hand corner, that's Harriet Tubman.
Absolutely.
Anybody know why she's up there? Okay, there's a book, it's called Something in the Life of Harriet Tubman. You get it on the internet. It's a first-person account. It's a third-person account. It's a woman named Bradford who is taking what Harriet said and then checking it to see is it true. all right, during her lifetime, while Harriet Tubman was alive. And so Harriet Tubman told her how when the men got dysentery, you know, these soldiers, because she was in the army, she would go to the river and make a medicine for them. I said, well, why do they keep calling her a nurse? Nurses don't make medicines. In those days, a doctor had no more qualifications than Harriet Tubman had. She said, she talked about how she would go to the hospital in the area, get some ice. She would let it melt. And then she would wipe the soldier's wound. She'd wipe the flies and the caked blood off of the wounds. And so, and this is healing. You see? Now this is a woman that was so-called illiterate, but as soon as the war started, she was very knowledgeable of the politics and stuff. She went right to a unit where she knew there was some people that had been involved in the Kansas wars. Anybody know about those Kansas wars? The Kansas Territory wars? Everybody knows about it. I think people here, some people know about it, but you know, when the United States was taking on new territory, there was a battle of whether or not the state was going to be a slave state or a so-called free state. And so in Kansas, they really had wars about this. And one of the leading people in that war, in those wars, was a guy we're all familiar with. People credit him with perhaps having been a catalyst for the start of the Civil War. Anybody know who that is? John Brown. Okay. John Brown in one of those little towns in Kansas. See, I mean, I had to look. I said, I had to just look back. They came and they burned this black town.
Yeah.
And he took his sons and they went to the other place and they caught the people and they hacked them to pieces with their swords. So that's why Harriet always had the respect for John Brown. And there were American officers who were involved in the Free State wars there, and Harriet went and found one of those units. So she knows more than most of us who have computers and social media and that sort of thing. She had her African mind. There's a war. The war is to control the African mind, and some they've controlled to a greater or lesser degree, and there are others that they were unable to control. So Harriet Tubman went for those. They got another crazy white woman now who's running around trying to prove that Harriet, you know, it was always said she made 18 or 19 trips into the South, 300 people, blah, 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 blah. So she's been going around to prove that she didn't make 19 trips.
Right.
She only made this many trips. So you fool, you make one of those trips with your face on wanted posters, talking about the tortures they're going to do to you if they catch you, so on and so forth, please. This is stupid stuff. This is stupid research, you know what I'm trying to say? This is stupid research. But all of that doesn't matter even because she's trying to whittle those numbers away. She can't whittle away the numbers of what Harriet did during the Civil War. She led a raid that nobody else could go up there because to get the so-called contraband, a raid that freed over 800 Africans.
Right.
So why are you going to quibble about the 300? You know what I'm saying? This is dumb research. But the thing she said that she did with medicine, that woman Braddock, she has in the back the things, and officers, you know, colonels, that sort of thing, wrote back and said, yep, she did that, she did that, she absolutely did everything they said. So I have her there. I could go around. I'm just gonna, you you all know Jan Matzlinger. If you don't know Jan Matzlinger and you don't know Real You, this is what you should do. Go online and find a video called Black History, Lost, Stolen, or Strayed. Who do you think put that video together? Many years ago. This is what I talk about controlling the African mind. He's a person that right now, people would jump up and they'll have a fight over it. Bill Cosby. He's the narrator of that. Go look at it and see he's the narrator of that. And he tells you about Matzlinger, who
Make the shoes.
he made shoes that last for the shoes. That's the top, putting the top to the bottom. It always had to be done by hand until he invented the process for putting those things together. This is the African mind. Next to him is Real You, who invented up sugar processing, way to make sugar out of sugar cane. And the guy next to him, I don't like false black history. I don't like when people say that Samson invented the cell phone. This is dumb stuff. This is dumb stuff, okay? And people use that against us, when you're trying to say your own history. But this man right here, Mark Dean, I think that some people know him, right? A lot of people know him. Mark Dean holds 3 of the first 10 patents in chip technology. Only problem is he worked for IBM. So I'm just saying, so I don't imagine, that he really prospered as much as he could have from that. Next to that is Jocelyn Elders, the first black Surgeon General of the United States. Who was supposed to be the first black Surgeon General of the United States? Anybody know? Henry Forster. Henry Forster. Why did Henry Forster not become? Because they. What you say? Okay, so Henry Forster became the. Henry Forster was nominated to be the Surgeon General, but he didn't get through Congress because they were able to prove, or they asserted some culpability in the Tuskegee experiment. So the Tuskegee experiment in 1969. Let me ask you, am I going? Is this all right with you?
No, that's good.
Want to control the African mind? Because I don't want to, Okay, so it's interesting.
They got enough faith.
So the guy who was in '69, some rumors were starting to circulate about this experiment, in which in 1932, 600 African men were brought into an experiment. 400 who supposedly had syphilis, and they had 200 controls. All right? Now, some people say that they gave the men the syphilis, but in general, the majority of scientists say that the men had syphilis. But some people like Dr. Bowles and others ask the question, well, look, how in Macon County did they get 400 men who just happened to have syphilis? Was promiscuity just, rampant there? And then other people look and say, well, if this study, because they wrote about 13 papers, 12 or 13 papers during the time they did this, if this was supposed to be a study of untreated syphilis, why'd you give them vitamin shots? That's a logical question, right? If you're trying to give them, why would you give them vitamin shots? So, there's questions as to that whole thing. But it went on from 1932. In 1969, it was still going on.
Right.
There were plenty of antibiotics. I mean, by World War II, there was some good antibiotics that could fight syphilis. So why was this unethical experiment allowed to go on? So the CDC, that's the Center for Disease Control, and this was an experiment that was operated by the Public Health Service, United States Public Health Service. The CDC had a meeting to determine whether or not the experiment should continue to go on. And you know what they decided? Yes. And it would have been going on now if it wasn't for 1972. Some of the Kennedys got hold of it and created a huge scandal about it, and so then they stopped it in '72. But if any of those men were still alive, it would still be going on right now. So Henry Forster, they said he was at that meeting, but he said I wasn't at that meeting. And it was never decided, but anyway, just in the scandal, they didn't let him be the Surgeon General. So one day, James Jones came and talked at Downstate Hospital. James Jones, anybody know who that is? That's the man who wrote the book Bad Blood.
Oh.
Bad Blood is a story of the Tuskegee experiment. So James Jones was there lecturing, and see, look, I went there and I listened. At the end, I only had one question I wanted to know, that I didn't know whether they'd done Henry Forster wrong or not. I raised my hand and I said, did Henry Forster have any culpability in the Tuskegee experiment? And he hung his head and he said, that was the question I dreaded somebody was going to ask. He said, a part of the experiment that people don't know about. Look, you don't want these men to receive antibiotics, right? Well, you're not the only one to give them antibiotics. By the 50s and the 60s and the 70s and the 50s, 60s, and 70s, antibiotics were commonly prescribed by your local health practitioner. Or if you got a pneumonia and you went into a local hospital. So they had to stop those people from giving them antibiotics. And he said at that time, Henry Forster was the head of the local National Medical Association chapter in that way, in that area. There's no way that he wouldn't know about that or have some involvement in that if you want to get to all the doctors. Who are you going to go to? You're going to go, so, I'm afraid he did. That was basically the answer that he gave. That's Jocelyn Elders. Right next to him is somebody that is an African hero. He is a nationalist before Garvey. He is a physician. He is a soldier. He is an officer.
My favorite.
That's
all
all.
time.
Go ahead.
Martin Delaney.
Martin Delaney. Tell him what he said to the mayor of, I don't know if it was Toledo or one of those mayors in that area. If you can do it, because I can do it, but I can't do it verbatim. I thought you might be able to.
Oh, he knows it verbatim.
Mark got it.
Oh, when he was asked about Fred Bassett?
No, he was asked about.
Oh, okay, I know what.
He was
Okay, he was asked about the Fugitive Slave Act.
Fugitive Slave Act.
Well,
In the Fugitive Slave Act.
I don't know it verbatim.
Okay.
But I can just give you some remnants, and you probably know.
I can probably do the same thing, so I'm going to do it.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So the Fugitive Slave Act was, an act that was passed. This particular one in 1850 said that if you come into contact with a fugitive, if you come into contact with this stolen property, this escaped property, you got to report it, or there's penalties for you. We'll lock you up. And he told this mayor, asked Martin Delaney, it's really worth, I wish somebody would find it in their phone and read the exact thing, because it's a hell of a quote. I don't want to butcher it, but he said,
It was
sir,
1857. He said,
sir, what I've learned of liberty, I learned from your founding fathers, your fathers. And what I learned is that a man has a right to liberty even unto the taking of life. That has a right to have his liberty. He says, if any man comes to my house in search of a fugitive slave, he said, be it the man who wrote this law, who signed this law, talking about Millard Fillmore, or be it constable or deputy,
constable, judge,
anybody,
a jurist on the Supreme Court.
Anybody. That's what he said. Or right, the Supreme. But he said. No. I'm saying he said a constable. He said, then I don't care if it's the person who wrote it, and if he comes with his cabinet as his bodyguard, if he comes with the Constitution or whatever this is, a shield or whatever, or something as a shield or whatever, whatever he comes with. He said, in other words, even if it's the President of the United States, even if it's the Pope, right? If I do not lay him a dead corpse,
A lifeless corpse
at my feet, then may the grave deny my body a resting place in heaven, my soul a home.
That's right.
And
Can't get more serious than that.
you can't get more serious than that. You can imagine some of these modern day politicians, if the governor asks them something or the mayor asks them something, you see them dancing and doing all kinds of things. Martin Delaney studied all kinds of things he studied about Kemet, he tried to make moves, Pan-Africanist moves in Africa. Everybody knows Dr. Drew and his pioneering work in blood plasma. My battery is running low. Why do I have a battery? Because I don't have it plugged in. Okay, let's plug it in. So we don't have to worry about that. we're gonna learn it by heart next time, right?
As a matter of fact, yes.
That's gonna be our project.
You said that shit.
I've said it 1,000 times, but I can't give it to you verbatim right now.
See,
It's
that's
been a while.
But we gave the gist of it.
That's what.
Yeah,
The key part, if I don't lay him a lifeless corpse in my
right. He said, may heaven refuse,
No,
me a home.
no, may the grave.
And the
refuse
grave
my
refuse-
home,
and a
and
resting
heaven
place.
my, yeah, resting place in heaven my soul a home.
Right.
You guys stop drinking. When you're sober, remember this.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, so we good. So I was going around that thing, and I'm going to tell you what Brother Truss, I learned from Brother Truss. He told me about a woman who was a spy. I mean, not me personally, but the group. He told who was a spy in the equivalent of the White House in the Confederate Army. The Confederate country, I should say. Okay. And as he told me that story, I thought of this man right here and his father. So this is Isaiah Benjamin. And his father was Jefferson Davis's almost closest associate, even though he was enslaved. Jefferson Davis was the what? The head of the Confederacy. He was the president
He was
of
the president
the Confederacy.
Former Secretary of State.
Yes, and former United States military officer. Just like
General.
yeah. Well, I don't think he was. I don't think he made general, but he was a former officer, and just like Colonel Robert E. Lee.
General.
Okay, you said I accept it. I just don't. I'm not 100% sure. Nevertheless, the father was on his plantation and he was like the business manager of the plantation. So his son, this guy Isaiah Benjamin, he worked like General Grant. He also worked, on one of these admiral ships. He was highly placed. So as the war started to end, his father, what's his father's first name? Benjamin is the last name. His father went to Jefferson Davis and he said, I don't know if he said boss or what he said. He said, look, they're closing in. They're going to be here on such, by such and such a time. He said, and they're going to take all your stuff. He said, why don't you sign it over to me? And then after you go to jail, for whatever time, when you come out, I'll turn it back over to you. And he was trusted just that much. And sure to his word, he kept his word on that. But Jefferson Davis said that, he said, Ben Montgomery, I'm sorry, this is Isaiah Montgomery, and the father's name was Benjamin Montgomery. Had it a little bit backwards. Okay, so he said, Ben, how do you know these things? How do you know these things? And then it's the article from which I'm getting this is a full-page story in the New York Times. You can get it now. I'm talking about get the original page, and you can see that. You can get it online. It's talking about the, Benjamin Montgomery. But I said, wait a minute now. If Isaiah Montgomery was with Grant, and he was on Jefferson Davis's plantation, and the sister, name starts with a B, I can't tell you how to spell it. She was in the White House. They had a spy network. They were killing the Confederacy because she was going around there. They thought she couldn't read and stuff like that. She could read. She was looking at the dispatches and going back and giving the information. So I have him on here because he invented a propeller that, in fact, him and his father invented this propeller, but the point of it is that in the United States, an African couldn't get a patent. But in the Confederate Constitution, it allowed an African to get a patent. Go figure. Well, I guess at the end of the day, since he belongs to someone else, it doesn't matter. But in the United States, sometimes things would be invented and you couldn't even get a patent. The guy couldn't get a patent because he didn't invent it if he didn't steal it. The so-called plantation, the owner, and then the so-called property couldn't get it because he wasn't, a citizen and couldn't get a patent. So anyway, I won't go around that whole thing, but I could. The one down on the bottom, her name is Cornelia. She wrote a piece called "The Basis of African American Distrust," and it covers basically all of the same material that Harriet Washington covers in her Medical Apartheid. You can get it online. Just put in "The Basis of African American Distrust," and she goes through all the different kinds of experiments and stuff that have been done on us. And then next to her on the bottom is, of course, Latimer, Lewis Latimer.
What?
Yes, Lewis Latimer. Yeah, and it's old age. Lewis Latimer is credited with inventing the carbon filament.
The light bulb.
Listen, I'm not gonna let this in, but I have a picture of the patent for the lamp. Okay, the thing went different stages, there were different pieces to it. But that same, what Professor Clark said was the carbon filament, and what the patent I have says is the lamp, because Edison was working on it at the same time. And the thing about it is, I'm sorry, I keep saying some things. Yeah, Edison. So what happened is that lamp, the sister said the bulb, was actually used in the film projector. Edison had lost in patent court to the other brother from Coney Island, all the stuff called the railroads, Granville Woods. And this man worked in one of the outlets, so he was familiar with Africans' expertise in science. He knew Latimer's ability, probably respected it less because Latimer was like an employee.
Right.
But Granville Woods, he was a competitor with him. Sometimes Edison would win in patent court, and sometimes Granville Woods would win. When they got tired of Granville Woods not being able to steal his stuff, they stole his stuff, and then instead of taking him to patent court, when he said they stole my stuff, what do you think they did?
With the criminal court.
They charged him with slander. And for a brief period of time, he actually was jailed. That's Granville Woods. But that's Lewis Latimer there. This other guy on the right, you have, we could just go through different stories, but look, this is just showing you the African mind. That is a saying that Africans have made a great contribution to the field of medicine in the United States. You know the second half of that? Most of it against their will. We've been either the subjects or the clinical material for the advancement of American medicine. These are some of the movies that Edison made with Latimer's filament, the advances on Latimer's filament and the lamp. The wooing and wedding of a queen. See, this is just vicious. You know that this stuff is not true, but you're making movies like that. So the point is that our African mind is used against us. We invent the things they destroy us with. Think of what the chip technology invented by Mark Dean does to us on a daily basis.
Programming.
Right? Think of what the movie projector does to us on a daily basis. The African mind is controlled by someone else. Let's see if I can move this. I think I can. Listen, I didn't know I had so much stuff, so it's the talking about it that really takes the time. I talked about this stuff before, and of course, can't go without this quote. When you control a man's thinking, you do not have to worry about his actions. You do not have to tell him to stand here or go yonder. He'll find his proper place and will stay in it. You do not need to send him to the back door. He will go without being told. In fact, if there is no back door, he will cut one for his special benefit. That's rough. That's Carter G. Woodson.
That's what Maggie do.
Anybody know those brothers?
That's Deacons for Self-Defense.
Deacons for Self-Defense, yes. And so last week I told you, remember I told you the first story I wrote for the Daily Challenge. This has to do with CMOTAP, the organization I belong to. What our mission is in our title. CMOTAP stands for Committee to Eliminate Media Offensive to African People. And we mean in any kind of media. And at the time, there was a young woman who was raped. She was St. John's University. She was a member of the rifle team. And one of the white members of the rifle team said he would give her a lift home, but first let him stop by his frat house, you know, to do something. When she was there, they gave her a drink. And the next thing she knows, she was being assaulted by the whole lacrosse team and a whole bunch of people. Then they took her from one site, they took her to another site, and the papers, those are some of the people right there. That's my picture. I'm pretty sure that's my picture there on the bottom of that thing that CMOTAP, we went to this trial, and these guys were going back and forth like they were, I think Wilbur Taylor said like they were going to their prom in peace. And Sister Betty Dobson, the founder of CMOTAP, she flipped this thing completely around. She took one of those big old cameras, those big video cameras, and you know, there were a bunch of us with her. She ran up on them as they were walking in peace, and she said, she started interviewing them like she was, you know, like a newspaper reporter. And so she said, how did you feel when you raped the girl? What was it like? What was on your mind? You know, this type of thing. And pretty soon, people started coming. So the air war, we were going there, we were doing the ground war, going to the court. But in the air war, when I was in the court, this is how CMOTAP got into the air war. I mean, in the mass media. We always had our own little newsletter. We always had our own flyers. But the idea to send it to the paper was something that, you know, came to me when I was in that court. Because I heard something and I looked, I saw the net, and I saw a few of the other writers, and they weren't, nobody was, I said, did they hear what the girl said? And what she had said was that they talked about killing her.
Wow.
None of this was in the white papers. They talked about killing her, and they tried to convince her that it hadn't happened. And that's one of the characteristics of date rape drugs, is that they can make a person have questions about their memory.
Right.
So she then said, they talked about killing her, and one of them said, no, we don't have to kill her. Because even if she tells somebody, nobody's going to believe her. Look at Tawana Grove.
Yeah.
That exploded in my mind because we were already, you know, dealing with this Tawana Grove thing. So I wrote a story, hand wrote it. I called DeWard Phillip, the editor of the paper, and I told him I was in the court and I heard something about it. When I told him, he said, send it. I sent it. So like the next day I was trying to see was my story in the paper. They had blacked out the front page, and that's the CMOTAP headline on the left. All of these are CMOTAP headlines. These are the stories we wrote, you know, every day on that case. And that's how the black community came to know about that case. By the time we got through, there was like 150, 200 people coming to that court every day and outside. And these guys, they couldn't take that kind of pressure. They were going crazy. There was a brother, I don't know where, this brother brought a harbor rope. You never see those ropes that bring in ships? And he had made it into a noose. And they just lost it. So much so that even though they got found innocent, the other ones, they got found innocent. I mean, I don't know what they thought, the girl did this stuff to herself or whatever, but afterward, the ones who came after the next ones to be tried, they confessed rather than go through that. For them, they thought that was hell. And these people, I don't think it hampered their careers or anything right now. One of the names I remember is Rabanowski. That's this guy right here. Look him up. You can find him on Google. And the girl, they had portrayed the story as though some guy named Todd had rescued her. No, that's not what happened. When they got to the second site, Todd said, who brought her here? And then when they told him, who brought her, he took her back to the first site. It was like, whose nigga is this? All right, take her back, to her masters. And they took her back, and then eventually they took her home. Next one. All of these. Listen. This is not a tenth of the stories that were written, or a tenth of these aren't even the best headlines. We had a headline with Mickey Mouse on the front of the Amsterdam as when we were fighting Disney and fighting Channel 7 for Gil Noble. We had a headline with Mickey Mouse on the headline. I mean, that was something. A big picture of Mickey Mouse, and we were tearing Disney up. And we were tearing ABC up for what they were doing to Gil Noble. This was when we were fighting this guy. They brought a new exec into on the left, and on the right is when we used to deal with Giuliani all the time. So that's one of the headlines we had on the Daily Challenge. We would do campaigns on certain things. On the St. John's rape, we did several. We did campaigns on Rudolph, on Giuliani. We did, a campaign. It actually became a book. I have it here somewhere. I'll show it to you. But as a little bit. Oh, here it is right here. It became a book. The unauthorized psychoanalysis of Rudolph Giuliani. When they tried to bother Dr. Abdul-Alim Shabazz down in Clark, Atlanta. Here's one. This is, and I hope Sister Rosalind is still here. This, Dr. Jeffries wasn't even here. He didn't know all of this was going on, but we got all these headlines before he came back. And one of them is in there. I called James Small and I said, James, we're putting these articles out, but we need a statement from Dr. Jeffries. Dr. Jeffries was in Africa. And so James said, okay, I'll call you back later. He called me back later. I don't even know if James spoke to the professor, to Dr. J. Dr. J can tell us. But Dr. J said, I stand on truth. All right? And then we wrote that into an article. And this one here was the killer. This was the one, it was the first time anybody called Simotech and asked for one of our articles. So when we wrote that, the Amsterdam asked for this article. And that was Russian Jewish scholar defends Jeffries against scapegoat. And that was William Loren Katz. Now the way we knew to go to him was that they used to have, and I told this last week actually, so part 2 was, I told you, this was really a part of part 1. So the way I figured out who to go to was that one time when Dr. J was on WLIB and they had this program about so-called Indians, William Loren Katz was brought in because he wrote the book Black Indians. And Dr. Jeffries called him Brother Katz. So when we would try, I said, so we looked, we didn't have any address, no contact, nothing. We looked, we saw a W.L. Katz down in the village. I said, yeah, that's probably where he would live. We gave him a call. And basically the article was verbatim the things that he said. And we won that battle. I mean, when Dr. Jeffries came to the airport, you were there? I was there too. How many people were there? We shook the hangar. The people could move in. And the thing is, once you become media savvy, you know what's going to happen before it happens. So what happens? They send in 13 protesters from the JDL, right? And they have see, and you also got to learn how to use that language the way they use it. So they came in with what they call hanging an effigy, right? And they had it, and they didn't know what Kendi cloth was, so they just had a whole bunch of different colors, you know, around. And so, what do you think we called it? We didn't call it hanging in effigy. What did we call it? Lynching Dr. Jeffries. Mock lynching of Dr. Jeffries. And we knew that although we had over 1,000 people in that hangar, Dr. Jeffries couldn't even come in. They took him a separate way. He couldn't even come in. Although we knew that, we were the story. What do you think the story was on the news that night? JDL protesters meet. They had 13 people. And basically, James Small and some other brothers, I don't have it there. We had a story, violence averted at Jeffries' return. That was the story we had there because they had to keep, you know, people would have just killed them. But what made us feel good at CMOTAC was the JDL held up their thing to the thing in effigy. You know what the people held up in front of them? And then I think I've been talking a long time. They held this up. I mean, multiple people had it, and they held this up in their faces. But you can't do any more than that. If your creative production is used as a weapon by your people, it doesn't get any better than that. As a writer, it doesn't get any better than that. Okay, and that same story, this is the Amsterdam Passport, it's in there. You see the pictures, you can't see it, there's Dr. Ben and Dr. Clark, and I don't know who else was in it. It might have been Shashi McIntosh in the bottom of that picture there. The whole community was rallied to the support of Dr. Jeffries. And although, you know, he won a court battle and that sort of thing, but although, you know, they find a way to cheat you your victory regardless, but at the same time, the battle of the African mind, we won. African people won that one. Here's, I'll just go through these very quickly. These last slides here. Okay, that's the one, violence averted at Professor Jeffries' welcome. That's the way we staged that. Since they made the JDL the head of the story, violence averted, and we tell the story of how people had, and I mean, believe me, they would have killed those guys. They would have killed them. And then we would have had another set of problems, and they would have blamed Jeffries for it. This one here I told you about last week. This was the Boombox Rebellion. That's Khalid Muhammad you see down the bottom. We had a demonstration, but that demonstration flipped 180 degrees when Khalid got there. Right here in this situation here, when this brass came over to Khalid, if I'm lying, I'm flying. The brother next to Khalid, as soon as that cop approached Khalid, he iron palmed him right in the chest. No hesitation. I thought we were going to get wiped out that day because it was a whole, you know, they had us totally outnumbered. But Khalid, so like you see that motion he made there with his hand, he said, because the people were still, we're making noise and everything. And Khalid said, if you want me to control, you better get that hired under control, or whatever. The people said, he's a hired. When they stopped that cop that this brother had hit, believe me, he wanted to kill us. He wanted to kill his own officer. He wanted to kill his own superiors because he has been taught that he is immune to that. You know, like how they say in the mafia, nobody can touch you now. He's been taught nobody can touch you now. But Khalid was a very special spirit.
Absolutely.
I seen him on a couple of occasions, I have to say. I don't know how. I don't know how to get in this show. Okay, Gutter Radio. This was another campaign, the Campaign for Hate Radio. We actually got Bob Grant and Jay Diamond moved off of ABC to another station. We just had article after article. Everybody was calling it hate radio. Before that, we bankrupted the New York Post, right here. With the article we wrote, we wrote on William Loren Katz, they called the Amsterdam. That's what that article says there. They called the Amsterdam and said that William Loren Katz wasn't the scholar I said he was, and that they called, this is how they did it. We called NYU and nobody ever heard of him because he was scholar in residence at NYU. And They said, and Dr. McIntosh is not a real doctor. It's pretty rough because I was the past president of the nation's largest union of salary physicians in the country. So that's kind of hard. You know, I mean, the people at Amsterdam, they didn't even look at that, you know. I mean, but at Harlem Hospital, it's the residents, the Harlem residents, we were the house staff. So I was first the head of the local house staff organization. That's a local union. It's called the Committee of Interns and Residents. All right, and then eventually I became the president of the entire city and also we had people in New Jersey, 5,000 doctors. So for a guy that wasn't a real doctor, we did pretty good. But that's what they wrote. And then eventually, the Amsterdam got a retraction on William Loren Katz. And I said, well, what about me? Y'all just left the slander on me without saying anything. That's the first thing. They said that about me more than once. They said the ABC. Yeah, here's where they said Dr. Katz explained in the Amsterdam article by James McIntosh. No, but down here he even said Dr. McIntosh was not a legitimate doctor. So at any rate, Jay Diamond said on the air that I had a phony MD, and I was supposed to be a rich man right now, but that, you know, the case wasn't handled right because there's a specific tort, a specific civil claim or crime, slandering a physician or surgeon, and that's what my license says. The right to practice medicine and surgery in the state of New York. So we were supposed to win that, but you know they had the courts kind of stacked, and we didn't go to the appellate level. This is social media. We make these memes and posts and stuff in social media, one on the left. We fight in the air, on the ground, so on and so forth. And then we also do, the main thing we do now, because we all got old, is we have community forums. So this was a community forum on black distrust of the vaccine. We had a gastroenterologist, a family practitioner, a psychiatrist. That same woman, Venelia, that I showed you, that thing, Venelia. Venelia Randall, the one that wrote the paper, she's a public health. She was a lawyer and a nurse, and she was on there. Dr. Lewis, Dr. Shadidi, and Dr. Keith Hunter, who was a rehab physician and anesthesiologist. And you know, we kicked it. Everybody didn't have the same opinion, but our community got to hear, you know, something other than the party line that they were giving you on TV. And this is a good thing because I had now this is a journal we put out called the Freedom Fighters Journal. It was before he was released to raise money for Sekou Odinga's defense fund. Yeah, that's it. I think I got two more, maybe. Yeah, there you go. So this is the original executive committee of CMOTAP. That's at our 10th anniversary. Can anybody find me in that picture? That's me right there. I have a little more here. And then this is CMOTAP. Now this was where we ran the movie Vaxxed. That's a Sphinx that we have at the front. This brother here is an artist. He's done all kinds of stuff for free for CMOTAP. Brother Lucian, very talented artist. And I actually had maybe 20 more slides that they won't come through on this. I mean, I can't even find them, you know. But brothers and sisters, I hope that you learned a little bit about the water control, the African mind, and
Absolutely.
that you know, I'm willing to take any kind of questions you might have.
Okay, the first question is going to be from the floor. Anybody from the floor wants to ask Dr. Mack a question?
Did That plantation manager guy, get the thing signed over to him?
Well, he did. Jefferson Davis signed it over to him, and he got it. His son was able to found a place, a refuge for enslaved Africans called Mound Bayou, Mississippi. But they basically eventually did a flim-flam on the father, Benjamin Montgomery, where he was not able to keep that, keep the stuff that he needed, certain land and money and stuff. They flim-flammed him out of it. So.
And did he give back Davis the land when
He gave back Davis, I mean, look, this
That was
is a
a
black man and,
real deal.
yeah, you know what would happen if he did it,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay, you're talking about the head of the Confederacy.
Right.
He just got a point at you.
Yeah. Him right there.
Him. What did he do? Anybody else? Thank you.
When you describing oniosis, I think that
Onesimus.
Onesimus.
Yes.
Somebody said, well, why would he say Boston? It was just it's more of just a community thing, just the good in a person's heart. And he had the knowledge, which shows you that African people had that knowledge of how to go one to another and to circumvent the disease by giving everybody I guess in today's technology that would be what's called variolation or
I don't know.
a vaccine.
Like a vaccine, yeah, like a vaccine. It's only he's not using the actual organism. He's using similar organisms.
Right.
Cow.
Anybody from the Zoom audience wants to ask Dr. Mack a question? Zoom audience?
They might be gone.
Anybody from the Zoom audience wants to ask Dr. Mack a question? Okay, well, I just want to say, in honor of Dr. Mackey, William Loren Katz and Professor Mackey were very good friends. He spoke at the service they gave him at DC 37, and I had the pleasure of meeting him after reading his book. Cool guy, man. William Loren Katz.
I want to thank you all for your attention. I really like when people have questions. So yes, my sister.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm sorry, I work with Dr. Jeffers. I don't know if you remember me.
Absolutely. I remember you. I think you helped me put one of the books together, right? One night. Yeah, we folded. We used to do. I told you we made broadsides. So like this is a broadside. This is actually the cover's missing, but this is that which cannot be destroyed, and it's about the mathematician Dr. Abdul-Halim Shabazz, who at the time that he was alive was responsible for 50% of the black PhDs in mathematics in the United States. And that was proven by Asa Hilliard. And he also brought Clark Atlanta back. And even though he did this, even though for 33 years he was exiled from Clark Atlanta. He did it in a very short period of time.
We worked on a couple of things that I found disturbing. In we got the Act of Inclusion.
The curriculum
Inclusion in 1983.
Yes.
And Kentucky wouldn't put the money, and that got stalled, and now we're at critical mass and critical
Race theory.
which is totally opposite 180 from it. And how do we get that on track? And the second thing was all that they did that was so wrong, including reparations. I just spoke to Harriet Tubman's descendant in Rochester last week plus. I was there for the bicentennial, and we got to meet Harriet Douglas's descendant and Frederick Douglass. Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass's descendants at the big official bicentennial thing they had at the Genesis Baptist Church. Then they had a woman who performed Sojourner Truth and one who performed Harriet Tubman. And they unveiled a new statue called Journey to Freedom. which goes on tour October 31st across the US, so y'all can look for this. She's pulling a little girl behind her, this new big 9-foot statue, we saw that. The thing that Malcolm wanted to do was go to the United Nations and or both the World Court.
Yes.
How do we get this back on track? Because they have so done us wrong, and in my opinion, the European in this country, we're still the captives in a captive, held captive in this stolen land. But the European has absolute impunity when it comes to our life. They can kill us anytime and walk away. And until Tawana Brawley, not one white man had ever been convicted of raping a black woman in the state of New York. That's how horrible they are.
It didn't happen in that case. It didn't happen in
Nobody
that
was
case.
convicted of
Oh, I know that, but I'm saying this was a fact that came
Even
out
up until then,
when they
yes.
accused him, the guy who killed himself with the Panon, whatever. The cop who killed himself, what did he kill himself for if he didn't do
He
it?
didn't kill himself.
Oh, they killed him.
Thomas Harry Chris.
Because he was
You
gonna
talking about
tell
Harry
the
Chris,
truth.
yeah.
He was telling the truth. But there's no way that Tawana as a child could put feces on her back and write on it and get in a garbage bag and be thrown on the side of the road or the dumpster, wherever they found her. Just like we find our guys in jail, hands tied behind their back, but it was a suicide, they hung themselves. And-
Well, Harry Chris didn't kill himself because how can you kill yourself and then dispose of the weapon and they come there and they don't find a gun?
Oh, right, right.
So he didn't kill himself.
Okay, but I'm saying.
But then the second time they
Tawana
came
told
to the
truth.
apartment, miraculously they found the gun right there.
But I'm saying,
Second
Tawana
time.
told the truth, we know that.
So,
I can't.
Miracles do that.
They have to stop killing us. It's like Ida B. Wells all over again and again and again.
Let me ask a question. The basic foundation for anything in any society is education. Why are we continuing to send our children to those schools? When you go into those schools, what you come out cussing your parents, disrespecting your parents, it's about time now we put forth solutions. I heard just about all of us know what the problem is. What are the solutions? The first solution is what George Vogel said. When you send, we don't have you today, but we have your children tomorrow. That's an easy statement. We go through this, see what's going on, experience what's going on, and we still send our children to these schools. They will come out like this. It starts with school. So to me, I try not to get into any discussion if we don't talk about how to break away from this society, to removing our children from the schools. We have all these small little churches. Caribbean people come here, they have lots of church. American people have come, all these other churches. But I don't see any businesses next to the church, nor I see any schools next to the church. All I hear is continuous segregation.
The schools were our churches.
What we have to do is to take our children out of these schools.
Yeah.
Something happened 2 years ago, started 2 years ago, this COVID stuff. It was kind of obvious. We live in a racist society. They tell you plug with it. Breathing your acid back into your system. What happens? Gum disease, bacteria grow, all sorts of issues grow. Eventually your blood is supposed to be bright red. When it's mixed with acid, it starts to turn bluish. A decay is setting in. A lot of people die from this. How do you prove this? Plug your nose up. Walk around, your eyes get red, and you smoke ganja or something like this. It makes no sense to me. I talked to many people about this. I never wore one. I never put one on. I wrote some things on the ground at Breezy Point. The federal police know me. The CIA know me. The FBI know me. The NSA know me. I've been talking about this for a long time. I talk on the phone loud and say anything I want. It's high time. What did they have done to our people? Fear. We created mathematics, calculus, geometry, guns, TV, internet, security system, refrigerator, washer and dryer, and much more. Hundreds. And this is our state we're in. How many of our children know this? I tutor. When I ask any of our children, tell me something about us. You know what the first thing they say? We're slaves. And then I proceed to explain to them who they are. And that's when I start this, when they go to school, they excel. We have to take our children out of these schools.
All right. So,
Hi, I'm John. It's a little bit off subject. And I saw the Woman King, and it was very entertaining, and I'm not afraid of a woman that could fight. But it was not factual. That's not the way it went down. And I went uptown looking for a bookstore, ain't seen no bookstore. That's the first question. Are there any bookstores open uptown?
Yeah, right.
How were they able to kidnap, the invaders come to Africa and kidnap so many of us? I know that some Africans must have helped in some way, but it's just mind-boggling that they took so many of us. And I'm trying to find a book to explain it. Not why do I? Because I want to know.
There is
I
a
want to know.
The human bookstore
was an
on
article.
Amsterdam.
well, come to Mackey's. Start coming to Mackey's.
More often.
More often.
Ray, let the doctor answer the question.
No, I wasn't trying to answer the question. I think this brother was here.
There is a book written called Barbarian. I think it's by our black scholar wrote a book. And in that book, it's detailed how they got into Africa, what they did. Several of our women, when we realized it, and they, in charge of armies, refused to let any white people on their land. Some of our people do know what to do, but some of us like to fraternize with the enemy and think we can play little games with the enemy. They come with mind games. Everything is a mind game. I live with some people in Vermont, white guys, and first when you live with them, they're kind of leery. But when they get comfortable, they start talking, real talk. And this is what they said to me. All our people do is laugh and dance and sing, and they have no respect for me. I found it very interesting. One of the things I did when I cleaned up the place up there, a friend had a book, and I passed, I saw the title of the book. I said, can I read the book? I read the book. An African man. A white man went to Africa, he had a story. He asked him, African man, what do you think about white people? And you know what he said? The white people are lazy, but they always seem to get the black people to work for us. We have to wake up. Our people created yoga. We wrote the Bhagavad Gita. Yeah, the Indian holy book Bhagavad Gita. We wrote it. Took it from Africa to India. A lot of things we just don't know. See those great classics? We should have it. Most of the children should have it. Most people should have it in their home. I bought a lot of them at Harvard University. I live at Harvard Square at one point. When I go into Harvard University, their own bookstore, the white man is watching me. He's like this. I just go, meditate, let my mind pick the book. I spoke twice at Boston University, Tony Martin and several coaches. And I took the books, put them on the desk. And I read from the books. And the provost and John Silver took issue with it. But they can't stop this. There is a change going on. We are going through something written. Our ancestors wrote it, they put it on the walls. When we find ourselves under mental slavery, go back to the hieroglyphics and translate. Only our people can do this. Other people come to do it, it's not the same. It's inside your DNA. You know, your DNA is your God. Now, this thing that they pull off here is mRNA. Everyone who took this, your God, which is your DNA, is going to remove you from it. You're not supposed to stand up and say no. It's very easy. This thing is not very difficult.
All right. Brother John?
More to your question, Professor Smalls and Dr. McIntosh are having a round table on the Woman King. But I spoke to Professor Smalls, and he said that it's really overblown concerning Africans selling each other into slavery. He said less than 4% of the Africans sold themselves into slavery. And Dr. Clark said years ago that what they call slavery, or what they say we had as slaves in Africa, was not the same thing. There was no Africans stopping other Africans from reading. There was no Africans stopping other Africans. And as an African, if you were enslaved or if you were punished, you were allowed to grow into the society and become a leader. I mean, we ain't got that until you.
That's why Dr. McIntosh and them is giving their event
to discuss this.
to discuss everything about the.
But let me ask you
The
this.
movie.
What about the African Africans that built the ships in Holland and formed the cartels in order to finance these things, and then granted charters to go enslave people. And what about the Africans that drew a line down the center of the earth, saying that the Portuguese had the right to render unto servitude on one side and the Spaniards on the other? What about that?
Well, you got.
They weren't Africans, they were Europeans. I'm being very facetious.
I know.
You want to talk about slavery, you're not talking about what happens right here as you capture people. You're talking about that whole thing that was set up. The Dutch West India Company, the Dutch East India Company, the boat makers, the Royal African Adventurers.
Insurance company.
Jews who are responsible for the trade.
They used to mortgage us.
But
It's like Chris Rock. It's like Chris Rock said. What black people don't have time to dice people up in those
Okay,
groups.
ladies and gentlemen, give Dr. Mack a great big hand. They're gonna have, hold up. You can ask them the question now.
Thank you, sir.
They're gonna have a program that's gonna come on October 22nd at 2 o'clock. The ID is get your pens, 824-5266-0615. And the passcode is 609158. And he has a variety of people that's going to speak on that.
You'll repeat that? Repeat that.
I'll tell you when it's over, I'll give it to you. So give Dr. Mack a great big hand. Also, October 30th, from 1 to 6, our Philadelphia family with Sister Empress Chi, the Million Women's March reunion kickoff is Sunday, October 30th. It's going to be at 1438 North 52nd Street in Philadelphia. That's going to be the kickoff for Sister Palladium, the Million Women's March to rise up, the mother of civilization. I have the flyer here. And next Wednesday, the court case from Omiya. They got buses leaving Manhattan
6 a.m.
at 6 o'clock in the morning.
17th Street, and 17th Street.
17th Street and Union Square, but when you get to Union
It's
Square, it's
all
a
one
big
big thing.
square,
Yeah,
you'll see
yeah,
a
yeah.
bus. So, thank you very much.
I gotta tell you something. The CIA inducted Harriet Tubman into their Hall of Fame. And they put a statue of her, a copy of the one in the Heritage Square up in Albany with her holding the lamp. They put a copy of that in there, and they insist they're teaching her methods, and she's the premier spy who taught them everything they know. So how can they still deny her pension the way her descendant told us to this day? They have to give her
Hold on a
that.
second, let's examine that right there, what you said. The thing that I find so interesting about Harriet Tubman is that although they present her as this patriot that fought for America, she was willing to pick up arms against America with John Brown.
Right.
There's sources, even that source I gave you, right, says that she recruited for him, she got people for him, and some reports say that she would have been there, but she got sick.
she got sick, that's why she didn't make Harper's Ferry.
That's what I'm saying. So the thing is, it wasn't like she was trying to get some America or not get some America. She was trying to get some freedom for her people, and she was willing to pick up arms with them or against them, depending upon the circumstances. What was it? Whatever was to the advantage of freeing our people, that's what she was doing. And it's the same thing for a lot of people that join the military or whatever. You know, it's basically, it's not about this patriotism and all that kind of stuff that you're talking about.
Right.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I mean, they're just trying to co-opt it.
And the statutes, they say she only did 13 trips. That they codified that in many ways.